बैक टू अनदर वीडियो और आपका आज वीडियो में
स्वागत है।
और भाई माजरत के साथ हम लोग काफ़ी लेट हो गए इस सेकंड पार्ट को देखने के लिए। कुछ दिन पहले ही हम लोगों ने जो पॉडकास्ट देखा था जिसका टाइटल आपको थोड़ी देर में मौजूद बताएंगे। इसके बारे में इसका पहला पार्ट हम लोगों ने देख लिया था कुछ दिन पहले और वक्त की कमी की वजह से हम लोग सेकंड पार्ट नहीं देख पा रहे थे। आज हम देखने जा रहे हैं। टाइटल क्या बताएंगे मौजूद?
टाइटल है फ्रॉम जिन्ना टू इमरान खान, रियल हिस्ट्री ऑफ पाकिस्तान एक्सप्लेन।
तो चलिए देखते हैं बाकी का हिस्सा कि क्या क्या उसमें चीजें एक्सप्लेन की है। लेकिन उससे पहले
इस वीडियो के चैनल का ऑफिशियल लिंक आपको हमारी वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन मिल जाएगा। सब्सक्राइब करिए, लाइक करिए, शेयर करो, फॉलो करिए इनके चैनल को। उसके लिंक में लोग चैनल का लिंक, इंस्टाग्राम का लिंक भी हमारी वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन मिल जाएगा। सब्सक्राइब करिए, लाइक करिए, शेयर करो, फॉलो करें।
चलिए देख लेते हैं ये वीडियो।
Just for better understanding, I want to ask you about Afghanistan as well, because Afghanistan has a massive Pashtun population. That's where this whole Pashtunistan narrative is coming up in the modern day as well, that the Pashtuns in Afghanistan are brotherly with the Pashtuns in Pakistan.
They're the same ethnic stock.
It's as if you're taking people of the same religion and the same culture and dividing modern day West Bengal into northern West Bengal and southern West Bengal. That's a sort of equivalent.
Well, in a very crude way, but you know, but the Pashtuns, you see, the Pashtuns were able to consolidate themselves under Ahmad Shah Durrani in 1757. Ahmad Shah Abdali, they became Durrani later on, and his territories were right up to Attock. He invaded India, so he consolidated the Pashtun area. His successors, and because the British had got into the act by then, so they in 1893 had this what's called the Durand Line, and the Durand Line drew a line across the heart of the Pashtuns, leaving some in Afghanistan and bulk in the territory of then the British Empire.
What was the reason the line was created?
Because they wanted a settled border. You see, they had the settled districts, which was NWFP. Then there was these tribal areas, what then became the federally administered tribal areas called FATA. These were the tribes which were not under the British system, and they valued their independence so much. Like Waziristan, for example, almost 50% of the British army in India was stationed in Waziristan during the Second World War because they just couldn't control those tribes. The maximum number of expeditions were into Waziristan, North and South Waziristan. They couldn't control those tribes. So they wanted to demarcate that this side is Afghanistan and this side is British India.
What is modern day Waziristan?
It was part of one of the tribal districts, now part of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province.
Okay.
And Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was formerly the NWFP.
So, when you talk about the British Raj and this Akhand Bharat map, the British were not able to actually take over all of Afghanistan, which is why Afghanistan is a separate country today.
Yeah.
And they didn't take over Afghanistan because
They tried. The first Afghan war, if you remember, when 16,000 army had to change the Shah, they wanted to replace the Shah with their own nominee, so that the Russian, you see, the big threat to the British Empire in India was a potential Russian invasion, which would then damage the jewel in the crown. So they wanted to make sure that Afghanistan would be a buffer state between the Russian Empire and the British Empire, and they wanted their own Amir over there. So this first Anglo-Afghan war, or the first Afghan war, an army of 16,000 went. Initially they were successful. This has been a part of history throughout, that any army can easily invade Afghanistan. They can't retain it. In 2 years' time, only one British army officer survived and came riding into Jalalabad. And when he was asked, Major Bryant, when he was asked, where is the army of the Indus? He said, I am the army. Only one, the Afghans had killed everybody else, and he was the one survivor. Similarly, in the second Afghan war, the British, very successful initially, later on they had to beat a hasty retreat. And finally, in the third Afghan war in the 1919s, Afghanistan was able to get back their foreign policy control under King Amanullah. And that's when Britain realized that, look, this is hamare bas ki baat nahi hai, let's leave it. So even the tribal areas. So to coming back, it was this, the Pashtuns, my fourth book is called The Pashtuns, A Contested History. I talk about Pashtuns on both sides of the Durand Line. And Pakistan's policy, again, we are moving much ahead, but Pakistan's policy towards Afghanistan is based on their insecurity that a strong government in Kabul will one day dispense with the Durand Line and claim territory up to Attock, that is up to Punjab. That this whole area is a Pashtun area, as part of the territories of Ahmad Shah Durrani. If you ask an Afghan, a Pashtun, he will say, ek taraf Afghanistan, us taraf Hindustan, kahan se aaya Pakistan? And this misnomer of Afghan and Pashtun, the Persians used to refer to the Pashtuns as Afghan or Afghana. So Afghan and Pashtun is interchangeable as far as the Pashtuns are concerned. If you call them Afghan, Pashtun, it's the same thing. In India, they came to be called Pathans. But it's an interchangeable thing.
They're also really friendly dudes. That's what I was like. If you ever meet a Pashtun guy, always up for a conversation, very hospitable.
Yeah.
Very different, and I know that there is this ancient rivalry with Punjabis. Is that accurate? Is that an accurate statement?
It still is in Pakistan. It still is a Punjabi Pashtun, the tension, the ethnic tension. It's been moderated. There's a lot of now Pashtun army officers in the Pakistan army.
Okay.
Trade. Karachi is the largest Pashtun city. Much more than Peshawar, Jalalabad, or Kabul, or Kandahar. So a lot of population has moved around, but yes, that ethnic rivalry sort of remains. Because, the Punjabi, because he's 52% of Pakistan's population, the arrogance, the swag, yeah. So he thinks he can dominate over everybody. Now, Pashtun is not a guy you want to push. There is a very famous Pashtun saying that the Pashtun who took revenge after 100 years said, I took it too quickly. So this revenge pushed. Generation after generation.
Oh, okay.
It lasts. And Pashtuns have a social code called Pashtun Wali, the way of the Pashtun, where revenge is a critical portion. For the most important thing with the Pashtuns is honor.
Like the Rajputs.
Yeah. So for them, honor is everything. And to take revenge if you are dishonored, and if the Pashtun does not take revenge, he is considered as Begairat, the man without honor. So he will do anything to take revenge. Time and space doesn't make a difference. If not he, his son, maybe not his, generation after generation. And the territory doesn't have to be Afghanistan, Pakistan. People have taken revenge in Australia. People have taken revenge in the UK.
How?
But they've gone there and they found uska descendant is there.
Damn.
So for the Pashtun, revenge is far more important, not the laws of the country they're in.
Wow.
To defend his honor, it's perfectly normal for him to kill somebody. This was the trait. Of course, things have changed because of modernization, urbanization, they've traveled abroad and things like that. But this is the basic instinct. Other thing about, as revenge is one, there is also this other thing about Melmastia, which is called an hospitality and none worthy of refuge. If an enemy comes to a Pashtun and says, I want refuge, he won't be able to refuse him. He'll have to look after him, give him shelter, give him food, and only when he leaves his territory will you try and kill him.
Okay.
That's why there is so much written about the Pashtuns, but the British, they just couldn't understand. A system which is so out of sync with Western values, where law and order is the most important thing, they couldn't comprehend what are these guys? So wild tribes, all the kind of epithets you can find, because they're not seeing the Pashtun from his perspective. You see, we've had so many invasions in India, but where did they all come through? All the invaders came through Afghanistan, devastating the land before they came to India. So the Afghans, the Pashtuns, have been so used to invasions that they've developed their own mechanisms how to live a hardy life, a very tough life, because of the invasions that they faced. Because invaders came right up to Punjab, some even further down, and then they went back again through Afghanistan, devastating the land.
Okay. Imagine the amount of generational trauma that exists in the modern day Afghan,
Yeah.
the modern day Pashtun.
Yeah.
I want to take you back to that timeline we were on.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. This is what podcasts are. I'm going to ask you one quick question about modern day Pakistan / the Pashtuns. You can give me a quick answer and then we can go back. There are these conspiracy theory oriented narratives online that Pakistan might be on the brink of a civil war. I don't know how true that is. But is it the same Pashtun versus Punjabi rivalry that's at the core of this thought? And is that even true? Is Pakistan actually at the brink of some sort of a civil war?
A short answer to that is civil war is too strong a word.
Okay.
Right? There is an insurgency in Balochistan. The problem with the Baloch is they have 44% of the land area of Pakistan, but about 5% of the population. They are not a critical mass. You know, like the Bengalis were East Pakistan, they were a critical mass. And again, there's the tribal system in Balochistan, so the tribes are, of course, now the educated middle class Baloch are getting a handle on the nationalist movement. So, but there is the fifth insurgency in Balochistan.
Okay.
The Sindhis too are not very comfortable with the Punjabi domination, the exploitation. But the real threat to Pakistan will ultimately come if the Pashtuns were to unite. You know, now you have the Pashtun nationalist parties like the Awami National Party. You have the Pashtun Qawmili Awami Party, which is in Balochistan. These again, the British were very smart imperialists. Balochistan today, the northern portion of Balochistan is Pashtun. When they got that area from the Amir in Kabul, they treated it as a commissioner's province, but merged it with the Baloch tribal areas and called the whole thing as British Balochistan. Didn't merge it with the settled districts of Pashtun. So even today, a lot of people get confused. How are the Pashtuns in Balochistan? It's a Baloch area. No, till Quetta and north of Quetta is actually a Pashtun area. So the Pashtuns are a critical mass. They have sort of imagination of Pashtunistan, their own area which they can govern, but they are divided, in tribal bases. Now you have an extreme Pashtun force in Afghanistan called the Taliban, and their methodology is not something which the Pashtuns of Pakistan really care about. But then you also have the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, if you heard of it, PTM, which are these young Pashtuns, civil rights activists who are protesting that we don't want to be treated as cannon fodder anymore for Pakistan's foreign policy objectives. I mean, this against the Soviets, who were the jihadis? They were all Pashtuns. They're the ones who died. War on terror, again, it was the Pashtuns. So there is this non-violent civil rights movement which harks back to some extent to Ghaffar Khan and his Khudai Khidmatgar. And they have a different conception of what the Pashtuns are. Then you have the Taliban who have not accepted the Durand line. They said it's a line which divides brothers. In some parts they have uprooted the fence, and much to the annoyance of Pakistan, because they thought the Taliban would accept the Durand line and this international border will be settled once and for all.
Okay, so basically the line that we see on maps, on world maps, the line that divides Afghanistan and Pakistan, that's not the actual version of what's happening. That's what you're saying?
That is the Durand line. According to Pakistan, it is the international border. When they left, the British also said this is the international border. But legally, if you go down deep, again, I have done that in my book. If you want, I can digress to that. Pakistan knows that this is not the international border. Therefore, they are keen for the Taliban. Thrice in the 90s, they asked the Taliban, please recognize the Durand line, and the Taliban said, we can't do it. Even now, after the Taliban took over Kabul in August 21, they said, recognize the Durand line, and Taliban have flatly refused.
So, the Indian perspective on Pakistani border disputes is just POK. We see a particular map of India and a particular map of Pakistan. They see a different version of Pakistan and a different version of India. We don't even think about the kind of issues they have with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But there's actually issues on both their borders.
Yes.
Like both the neighboring countries don't accept the borders that Pakistan claims it has.
Yeah.
Now continue, sir. Would you like to expand on this, or would you like to go back to the timeline? It's up to you.
No, so let's finish this
Sure.
Durand line thing. So, after the Third Afghan War, there were two treaties, 1919 in Rawalpindi and 21 in the Treaty of Kabul. Now, that's a very interesting treaty. It talks about this Anglo... See, there is no treaty between Afghanistan and Pakistan post-47 on the border. The last treaty is of 1921. It's called the Indo-Afghan border. So, even today, the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan is called the Indo-Afghan border after the 1921 treaty. Now, the 21 treaty specified that after 3 years in existence, either of the two sides, either the British India or Afghanistan, can rescind this treaty by giving 12 months' notice. In 1949, there was a Loya Jirga which was held by the Afghan, and they said we do away with all treaties, including the Durand Line, the Treaty of Gandamak and Rawalpindi, everything. We do away with all this. So as far as the Afghans are concerned, there is no Durand Line, there is no demarcated border. Pakistan knows this. Pakistan knows that legally there is no border, because they have not even tried to re-establish it after 47. That after Pakistan came into existence, they could have negotiated with the Afghan government and said, this is demarcate the border. They didn't do it. And the Afghans, so the Loya Jirga said there is no border. No government in Afghanistan since 1949, whether it was the monarchy, whether it was the Muhammad Dawood, whether it was the PDPA or the Mujahideen or Taliban 1 or Taliban currently, has, or even Karzai or Ghani, they've said there is no border. We cannot accept the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Therefore, Pakistan is so keen. Therefore, they want a dependent, weak government in Kabul which does not raise the issue of the Durand Line. And their entire foreign policy is geared towards keeping Afghanistan and Kabul weak and dependent on Pakistan. Now, the Taliban are a different kettle of fish. Pakistan had thought that these people would be grateful to us. 20 saal se we have supported them in the insurgency. Now, when they come into power, the first thing they will do is recognize the Durand Line. But the Taliban or the Pashtuns are beholden to nobody. They said, yes, thank you so much. Now, there's another concept of the Pashtuns, which is Watan. As far as the Pashtuns are concerned, or the Pashtun refugees who took refuge in Pakistan, they are in their own Watan, they are in their own homeland. Because this was the territories of Ahmad Shah Durrani. कि हम अपने वतन में हैं. We may be in Pakistan today, we are grateful to Pakistan, but ये वतन हमारा है. So, neither the Taliban especially, they will not accept the Durand Line. So for Pakistan, it's a big security challenge. So the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is the one in Pakistan, is now wanting to, the tribal district that I talked about earlier has been merged with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They want it to be demerged and they want to establish their own writ in that. So Pakistan actually faces a pincer movement from the Pashtuns. The Taliban have not accepted the Durand Line, which challenges the sovereignty of Pakistan. And the TTP on this side of the Durand Line says we want our own territory, we want our own area. And they have set up provinces, shadow governments called Valaya in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and FATA, and even now in Balochistan and in Punjab. So it's a pincer movement that Pakistan faces, and if they don't handle it imaginatively, there's trouble brewing just under the surface. So to come back to your original question of a civil war, the problem I feel can happen from anywhere. But most likely it is the Pashtuns if they get their act together.
Okay. Wow. So it gets more intense.
So, it's called a polycrisis, where several crises come together in space and time, making any crisis far more serious than what the original crisis was.
Okay. My original thought with this episode was that we'll do Pakistan history right from pre-independence up till at least Kargil. Maybe we'll end this particular episode by just talking about the last few days of Jinnah and how Pakistan remembers him in the modern day. And then we'll move on to modern post-independence Pakistan history and the present and the future. So, but would you like to close this Jinnah chapter now?
I leave it to you, or whatever we want. See, before we close this and the historical portion, I mentioned right in the beginning, the genetic fault lines of Pakistan. It's very important for your viewers to understand that why is Pakistan today a troubled and troublesome state? You see, Jinnah, as I mentioned, he said Hindus and Muslims. But how do you get the Muslims to vote for you? Because in the areas that became West Pakistan, the Congress League was very weak. The Muslim League was very weak. In Punjab, there was a coalition government of Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs. In NWFP, there was a Congress government. Only in Sindh was the Muslim League had a presence. Now, Jinnah was opposed to mass mobilization. He was opposed to land reform because bulk of his supporters were landlords. So how do you enthuse the Muslims to vote for you? Religion. So the slogan became, Pakistan ka matlab kya? And the answer was the kalma, la ilaha illallah. And in the 45-46 elections, they said this is a fight for Islam. Even when the contest was between two Muslims, they said एक तरफ इस्लाम का नुमाइंदा है, दूसरी तरफ कुफर का नुमाइंदा है. Or this is a fight between haqq and batil, right and wrong. So he unleashed the genie of religion at that time. And since then, Pakistan has not been able to put the genie back. Because once you unleash forces like this, कि Pakistan का मतलब क्या? Then the Islamic parties, the religious parties got after it. कि Pakistan बन गया, अब तो it should be an Islamized state. For then him to talk like he did in his famous August 11th speech, of you're free to go to your temples, you're free to go to your mosques, and is it where? This is created on the basis of Islam, on the basis of two-nation theory. So then you had the objective resolution, anti-Ahmadiyya riots, Ahmadiyyas being declared non-Muslims, and finally ended up with Zia, who started this whole process of Islamization. So one big genetic fault line in Pakistan, started by Jinnah, was the injection of religion into politics.
This was an example of using religion to unite a bunch of people and tell people that, listen, you guys need a separate country. But in the long term, this backfired in some ways.
Absolutely.
Because for a lot of the locals in Pakistan, they identify more as their ethnicities rather than their religion. So at least historically, they did so.
Yeah. So just 2 days ago, or yesterday, 15 churches in Faisalabad have been burnt down on the basis of somebody was supposed to have done something, called blasphemous. So the mobs went on the rampage and they've burnt down so many churches, destroyed the cross, and much to the cheering of volunteers of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik party. So it will not going to stop, and this all traces back to that. So this is one major fault line, that Pakistan has become so radicalized and so Islamized that it is, in the future, it will be very difficult to pull back. I'll give you a very gruesome example. Some years ago in Okada, district Okada, there was a rural gathering where the Maulvi asked a question and a poor 14-year-old boy raised his hand by mistake. Maulvi said, Gustake Rasool, you have committed blasphemy. And the congregation also pounced on them. This poor boy felt so overwhelmed that he went in the nearby field and using a fodder cutting machine cut off his own hand. Came back and presented it on a plate to the Maulvi, and people cheered. It was such a gruesome act that The Nation, which is the major daily, English news daily, wrote that if a person is willing to hurt himself in the name of religion, can you imagine what he would do to others? So this is the kind of radicalization and Islamization that has gone on. Today, in the same city, same mohalla, you have different kinds of mosques teaching. First thing they will say कि वो देवबंदी है, वो kufr hai. He's not the right thing. The Deobandi will be saying the Ahle Hadith and the Barelvis are. So this kind of sectarianism, this kind of hatred is being created even among the Muslim sect. So you can imagine what's going to happen to the others, the minorities. Minorities are sitting ducks.
What I've come to realize about the average urban Pakistani is that they're not that extremist. But in saying that, what you said prior to this, which is that if you make a country based on religion, eventually that thought is going to come back to bite you. Because in the modern day, being secular is an important part of modern day countries. That's what I feel. Please, you can disagree with me if you think I'm saying
but not
something.
in the case of Pakistan. What is secularism in Pakistan? They are a 98% Muslim country, divided into various sects. And they are fed this daily dose. Not only in madrasas, in government schools.
Okay.
Through textbooks and on sermons in the mosque. So, बेचारे के ज़हन में क्या आएगा?
Yeah, I think the point I was making was that I have met the urban elite of Pakistan the same way that I'm the urban elite of India. When we meet, there's friendliness, there's brotherhood, and then there's the masses who are affected by what they see in the news media. They are affected by the original religious thoughts of Pakistan. They are the extremists, but unfortunately, this might be more than 99% of the country. Because we're just probably meeting the 1% that find the way to Dubai, that find the way into content creation. Am I right? Would you like to correct me?
Yeah, no, that's true. You see, it's depends on the milieu in which you meet people. You meet them in Dubai, you meet them in London, you meet them in the US. One, you meet them in Pakistan. It's a different attitude because they're living in that milieu. Na? Day in and day out, if you are bombarded. Look, I'll tell you simply. Qaida, like A for apple, B for every child who goes to nursery reads that. The Qaida, what I've seen myself, Zar se zalim. And there's a photograph of a Sardar. Man of a 5-year-old boy, what do you think image he's going to have of a Sardar? Zalim. Dar se daku. There's a Hindu with a fat tone and a bodhi. So in the mind of a child, Hindus are dakus. And that gets reinforced by the textbooks in government schools. There are studies carried out by Pakistani think tanks. The one very famous one called the Subtle Subversion by the Sustainable Policy Development Institute of Islamabad. They actually document what are the themes that are taught to children and how they distort the version of history, and things like Pakistan is for Muslims alone, Islam, Hindus, hatred against Hindus, Jews and Christians, they are the enemies of Pakistan, enemies of Islam. This is all documented. This is actually being taught in Pakistani schools. Now, this is something which people in India perhaps don't realize. I mean, I mentioned this in my book. My book has been in the market for 2016. And no Pakistani has disputed it. An intellectual has even called it as the best book on Pakistan. Because the thinking Pakistani, and they realize what is going wrong with their society. And they are some brilliant Pakistanis. They are helpless. They're not able to flow against the tide.
I do have one burning question in my head and heart, which is that if we can do a bit of an exercise where you and me time travel back to 1947, okay? The partition's happening. Many Muslims from India are going to Pakistan. Many Hindus, Sikhs, Christians from Pakistan are probably moving to India. Why did the modern day Indian Muslim, why did that person's ancestors or grandparents not choose to go to Pakistan? And then I have a vice versa version of that question as well. The Hindus, Sikhs, Christians that are in Pakistan today, why did their grandparents or great-grandparents not take that call and go to India? That's one part of the question. I'll get to the second part later.
So, many more Muslims stayed back in India, from all over India, than those who actually went. The people who went with the hope and expectation that, country created in the name of Islam, and the kind of propaganda that the Muslim League had said, Pakistan ka matlab kya, as I mentioned, la ilaha illallah, that it's so that they felt they were looking for the new Medina, as it were. So that's why a lot of people went. Those who stayed back, I think probably couldn't go, maybe, or they felt that, we can do perhaps as well, if not better, in a secular milieu. As I mentioned, the sects, different sects. Islam was, the Indian Muslims were not just a unified, just on the basis of Islam. They were divided into different sects, and they probably felt that they could do as well over here. In fact, Jinnah was asked this question when he was deplaning from Karachi. From Delhi, he was going to Karachi. So he was asked that, what message do you give for the Indian Muslims who are stayed behind? He said, I expect them to be good citizens of India, and I expect that the Congress government to look after them. Now, the follow-up question was, if a Hindu Congress government can look after the Muslim, then why did you create Pakistan? His reply is not known. We don't know what he said. But this is a fundamental question. That if you now say that the Hindu Congress government will look after the Muslims, ज़रूरत क्या थी फिर पाकिस्तान बनाने के लिए?
Can you draw out a picture of the modern day non-Muslim in Pakistan?
Pathetic. Very pathetic conditions.
Okay, because there's lots of narratives going around online. It's a lot of comment section banter that talks about this. See, I'll tell you what's happening with people my age. Most urban people that I meet, okay, very rarely are they out and out pro Modi, at least the ones I meet. Maybe because I'm in media. My world in media is primarily anti-Modi. I don't know why that is. Now, there can be 1,000 reasons. And their narrative for being anti-Modi is that, look how our Christians, Muslims and Sikhs are being treated.
In India.
in India. And I'm relaying narrative. This is not what I believe. Okay, because I get to talk to people like yourself, so I believe I get a more of a 360-degree perspective. You'll always find one person in that same room countering these people who are anti-Modi by saying that, hey, do you know how non-Muslims in Pakistan are treated? Like, if you think we are targeting non-Hindus here, go to the other side of the border. I would love for you to shed some light on both these arguments.
See, on the Indian side, there was a recent Pew service, you may have seen it, Pew survey. 96% of the Muslims were asked, were happy that there were no restrictions on their observance of their religion. 96%. 4% said moderately. 96% of the Muslims were satisfied. 90% of the same Muslims were said they were proud to be Indians. Right? So this propaganda is basically that. It's propaganda. It comes from the US. So somebody said, what is the situation in the US? 60% of African Americans said they had hindrance in pursuing their religions in the United States. So what is it we're talking about? How can you compare? When 96% of the Muslims say they're happy, तुम कौन बोलने वाले हो कि नहीं, you're unhappy?
I also feel that...
And one more, if I let me...
Sure, sir.
Jammu and Kashmir, there was violence for so many decades. Since 89, there was violence going on. Not one Muslim for other parts of India actually went there said it is jihad. No Indian Muslim from other parts of India went to say it was jihad, whereas Pakistan was shouting from the rooftops, jihad in Kashmir mein, ye Kashmir mein. Why? They're fully satisfied, they're integrated into the country.
Coming back to this question about the modern day non-Muslim in Pakistan. Did their grandparents and great-grandparents choose to not move to India because they couldn't afford it? I'm sure that's one of the reasons, because I believe that there's a massive tribal Hindu population. I'm using the word massive loosely here. But
Soda Rajputs are there on the border between Rajasthan and... You see, again, when partition took place, a lot of people didn't know what it meant. I'll give you a personal example. In the case of my wife's grandparents, when this troubles and all started, so one of their relatives sent them a truck कि भी आप आ जाओ, सारा सामान लेके आप आ जाओ. They said, क्या बात है? We'll be back. So they just took the cow that they had, put that in the thing, and one carpet को, पानी आ जाएगा. So that's all they came up with. Everything else was left as is. They didn't think they will be back. Jinnah, who had a house in Mumbai and a house in Delhi, he told the first Indian High Commissioner, Sri Prakash, that tell Nehru that I want to go back to Bombay. After having created Pakistan, because he said, I want to go and live in Bombay. It's a lovely house. I want to go and live there. So a lot of people didn't think troubles will blow over. Some people, yes, some people had properties. They didn't want to give up those properties. Some people, maybe they couldn't afford to move away. Or people said, हमारे पुरख यहाँ पे have been interned here, been buried here, their memories are here. How can we leave them and go?
was it like the non-Muslim elite that chose to come to India?
I haven't studied this, so I can't tell you whether it was the elite or not. But yes, the bulk of the land which was owned in Sindh was owned by the Hindus. So taking that as an example, yes, the elites would have left, and then that was taken over subsequently.
Because probably the elites were educated enough to be able to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, possible.
And
it's possible.
The people who couldn't afford it, maybe they didn't have the know-how or the education. Their successors are probably suffering today.
Yeah.
Will India take any of these people?
So the whole thing about CAA was precisely this, wasn't it? That people who are persecuted in the neighborhood,
Shed some light.
Yeah, the Hindus, the Christians, the Sikhs who are persecuted in the neighborhood can come and accelerated citizenship. It's not that they'll get citizenship on arrival. Mm-hmm. It'll be just an accelerated. It doesn't mean that other people who have come, their citizenship is going to be jeopardized. But that this will be accelerated.
Okay.
That was the whole idea. Now you see, if you're a Muslim majority country already, and then you want refuge, so it's different than being a minority in that particular country and wanting refuge. And that was the whole rationale behind CAA.
Okay. Where does CAA stand today in 2023?
I'm not sure. I think there was a lot of Shaheen Bagh and things like that. There's a lot of agitation. I'm not sure whether the rules have been notified or not. I'm not sure.
Okay, because again, the urban narrative of CAA was that it was an anti-Muslim movement, where the current government is against the modern day Indian Muslim.
But that would have been so if the normal track of somebody applying for citizenship in India, a Muslim, had been closed. That's not been closed.
Okay.
That continues as it is. There is no... So, again, fake narrative. It's easy to scare people. ये कर दिया. Demography of Kashmir is being changed.
Yeah.
These are the kind of fake which are easy to sell. People are willing to believe the worst.
May I just say that you're a stellar guest. So
No. It's just down, feet on the ground. Yeah.
I'm enjoying the shit out of talking to you, sir. It's crazy. Pardon my language. Pardon the casualness of this conversation.
No, it's great because, your curiosity is kindling my whatever little knowledge I have to explain to you and through you to the audience, because I think it's important. It's important for people to know, the past, what's happening in the present, and what are the really roots of what is happening. So thank you. You're really drawing me out.
No, I'm happy to learn from you, sir. I feel that this is the point of history. You understand the timeline of what actually happened, connected to the modern day, understand that, these effed up things that are happening today happened because that happened at that point. And that's not what's taught to us in school. So I hope that people relearn a bit of modern day history through podcasts in general.
I'm sure they will.
Okay, Tilak sir, we're going to be back with you next week on the show, but in 5 minutes in reality. Okay. So I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was part 1 of our special on Pakistani history. I want to apologize to anyone, especially in Pakistan, if you feel like this episode or any of the episodes that we've created on TRS have offended you in any way. That is not my intention. My intention with this show is just to deep dive into subject matter. I'm more than happy to actually host some Pakistani guests on my show. I will be doing a Dubai schedule soon. So especially if we have Pakistani listeners, I'd love to read your comments in the comment section. Interact with us. Not every Indian comment section will take you on and fight with you. We're basically cut from the same cloth, genetically speaking, historically speaking. I would love to hear some fantastic Pakistani perspectives as well. And of course, if we have international listeners, the same applies to you. Please send us your guest recommendations. What I will end this episode with is a preview on the next one, where we speak about post-independence Pakistani history up till about 2005-ish. There will be many episodes that will come out featuring Tilak Devasher. He's an amazing guest. He's a dream guest for me on this podcast. I'm always looking for new guest recommendations from you guys as well. So please tell me what you thought of this one and tell me who else you'd like to see featured on TRS. We'll be back soon.
भाई आज की वीडियो में काफ़ी ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक्स जो है वो चूज़ किए गए। खासतौर पर मैं स्टार्टिंग जहाँ से पश्तून से वहाँ पे बात करना चाहूँगा। तो नो डाउट डूरेंट लैंड का जो है वो अभी तक आपको जो है वो मसला जो है यहाँ पर देखने को मिलता है। हर कुछ अरसे बाद जो है ये मसला जो है वो दोबारा से स्टार्ट होता है, फिर दब जाता है, फिर स्टार्ट होता है। नहीं, ये चीज़ जो है चलते रहते। इवन के भी रिसेंट टाइम्स में अगर बात की जाए तो पाकिस्तानी गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से जो है वहाँ पर बाढ़ लगाने की भी जो है वो की जा रही कि भाई पूरी डूरेंट लैंड जो है उस पर जो है बाढ़ लगा दी जाए।
दिया जाए, मतलब वो जो ऐसे वायर होती है
ना, वायर बिल्कुल।
मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि कुछ एरिया में तो शायद
कुछ एरिया में लग चुका हुआ है बिल्कुल।
मैं ये बात बोलूंगी कि
लेकिन सॉरी आपको इंटरप्ट करूं, लेकिन हाँ ये रियलिटी है कि अफगानिस्तान जो है, जो वो वाली साइड है, वो डूरेंट लाइन को बॉर्डर जो है वो नहीं मानते। हाँ बिल्कुल,
हाँ वो तो। लेकिन मैं एक चीज सोचती हूँ कि इसमें आपके कर्म बहुत ज़्यादा मैटर करते हैं। देखो, अगर हम लोग, हमारे जैसे जो आज की जनरेशन है या अब हमारी जो आने वाली जनरेशन है, जिस तरीके से सर ने बीच में बात की कि जो टेक्स्ट बुक्स में पढ़ाया जाता है या फिर एक आपका जैसे माइंडसेट तैयार किया जाता है, तो आपको हिस्ट्री उस तरीके से ना पढ़ने दी गई है, क्योंकि उस टाइम पर बहुत सारे लोगों के पास ऐसे मीडियम नहीं थे। स्पेशली अगर मैं एक मिडिल क्लास लोगों की बात करूं, इंटेलेक्चुअल्स जो थे उस टाइम पर भी, उनको भी काफ़ी चीज़ों का पता था, बट इट्स जस्ट कि वो कुछ कर नहीं सकते थे उस टाइम पर। लेकिन मैं ये बात बोलूँगी कि आज के टाइम में आपके पास इतने मीडियम हैं कि एटलीस्ट आप सोच सकते हैं, उसके ऊपर बात कर सकते हैं। और मुझे एक कहीं ना कहीं पर थोड़ा सा चेंज ज़रूर नज़र आता है इन डिस्कशंस में कि लोग कुछ जानते हैं। हाँ, इतना डिटेल नॉलेज, इतनी डीप नॉलेज अभी भी लोगों को नहीं है, बट अगर मुझे लगता है कि अगर हम लोग जैसे आज का पॉडकास्ट है, हम लोगों ने पश्तून की हिस्ट्री के बारे में जैसे मतलब मुझे आज जैसे पता चला है कि वो शुरू से ही बहुत टफ लोग रहे हैं। तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि जैसे पाकिस्तानी है, इन्होंने एक टाइम पे जिस तरीके से सपोर्ट किया, ठीक है ना, अपने मकसद के लिए, तो मुझे लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं पर उस चीज़ में आपको हिस्ट्री को मद्देनज़र रखना चाहिए कि लोगों का क्या एटीट्यूड है। अगर हम इनको इस तरीके से इस्तेमाल करेंगे तो फिर एक टाइम ऐसा भी आएगा कि हमें भी प्रॉब्लम्स जो है वो फेस करनी पड़ेंगी। और मुझे साथ में ये भी ज़रूर लगता है कि डोमिनेंस नहीं होनी चाहिए, उस तरीके से आपको इक्वल राइट हर जगह पर देने चाहिए ताकि लोग जो हैं उस मतलब कंट्री को अपना समझकर वहाँ पर रह सके, और मैं ये कहूँ कि बल्कि कंट्रीब्यूट कर सके। अब ऑनेस्टली बताऊँ, ये पंजाबी एरोगेंस वाली स्पेशली पाकिस्तान में ये मुझे यूट्यूब के थ्रू पता चला है। मुझे नहीं पता होता था कि क्योंकि पंजाब जो पंजाबी हैं वो पाकिस्तान में मेजॉरिटी में होते हैं, तो उनमें एक एरोगेंस होता है क्योंकि हम लोग भी पंजाबी हैं। सो मुझे कभी ये चीज़ इसकी
वैसे अगर बड़े शहरों में ये चीज़ की बात करें तो आपको ये चीज़ जो है फील नहीं होती,
लेकिन शुरू से मुझे हमारे बड़ों में भी ये चीज़ नज़र नहीं आई कभी। हो सकता है गांव वाली साइड पर ये चीज़ें हों और अभी भी एग्जिस्ट करती हों, बट जब तक हमारे तक आते थे चीज़ें, मुझे ये नज़र नहीं आई अपने बड़ों में कि हम पंजाबी हैं तो कुछ बहुत अपने आप को कुछ समझते हों। तो मुझे लगता है कि जो पंजाबी एक्चुअली ऐसे हैं उनको भी चाहिए कि वो इस तरह की चीज़ नहीं होनी चाहिए, सबको इक्वल राइट होना चाहिए, क्योंकि मुझे लगता है कि आप जिस भी ज़मीन पर रहते हो वहाँ पर आपके सबके इक्वल राइट्स होने चाहिए। और इनफैक्ट मैं ये बात ज़रूर सोचती हूँ कि देखो जो लोग मतलब कि ब्रिटिश लोगों से नहीं संभल सके, लाइक जैसे कि अफ़गानिस्तान की उन्होंने बात की, मतलब वो इतने टफ लोग हैं। इवन कि आज भी अगर हम लोग बात करें तो मतलब फाटा, वज़ीरिस्तान, ये ऐसे लगता है कि जैसे आप जब सुनते भी हो कि बहुत बाहर के आपको इलाके रखते हैं। जब लास्ट टाइम पर हम लोग कुमराट गए थे, सीरियसली हम लोगों को वाकई में वहाँ पर डर लग रहा था, क्योंकि एक तो लोगों के हम लोग को हुलिये ऐसे लग रहे थे जो हम लोग मूवीज़ में देखते हैं, तो हम लोग इतने डरे हुए थे। औरतें आपको ज़्यादा नज़र नहीं आती और ऐसे लग रहा था पता नहीं आप पाकिस्तान से कहीं बाहर चले गए हो, आपको ऐसे वाला एरिया नज़र आता है। तो क्योंकि वहाँ पर ज़्यादातर आपको ट्राइब्स, आई थिंक वो
बिल्कुल असल में कुछ है कि नॉन कस्टम चीज़ें जो भी है वो आपको काफ़ी ज़्यादा जो है वो देखने को मिलती हैं।
नॉन कस्टम के अलावा मौजूद तुमने ये नहीं देखा था कि जैसे मतलब उन्होंने कपड़े पहने हुए थे और जो एक हुलिया था, लाइक उसको देख के लिटरली
असल में मैं बताता हूँ, बेसिकली हमने वो जो उनके कपड़े देखे थे ना वो वहाँ के ट्रेडिशनल थे, वहाँ के कल्चर के हिसाब से थे। हम यहाँ पर उस तरह की चीज़ें जो है वो देखने के जो है ना वो आदी नहीं है। तो हमने जब फर्स्ट टाइम वो चीज़ें देखी तो लिटरली आपको जो है ना थोड़ा सा फील होता है कि यार हम पता नहीं कहाँ पर जो है वो आगे। लेकिन हाँ, अगर देखा जाए तो एक लंबे अरसे से जैसे जो है लिटरली अगर मैं जैसे पाकिस्तान में हम रहते हैं तो आपको जो है ना दूसरे प्रोविंसेस में जाते हुए थोड़ा सा फील होता है, जो एक दिल में जो है शुरू से चीज़ बिठाएगी भाई फलानी जगह जाओगे ये होगा, फलानी जगह जाओगे वो होगा, तो वो डर भी जो होता है ना आपके अंदर का, वो भी कहीं ना कहीं आपको तंग करता है।
मैं एग्जैक्टली इसी पॉइंट पर आने लगी थी कि ये डर किसने बनाया हमारे अंदर। अगर हम अपने ही कंट्री में डिफरेंट कल्चर्स को अगर उनको मतलब बिना डर के एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर पा रहे, तो इसका मतलब है कि हमारे माइंड इस तरीके से बना दिए गए हैं और हमारे अंदर वो चीज़ डाली गई है कि जैसे अब फॉर एग्जांपल मैं ये बात करती हूँ, मौसम जैसे अक्सर ये बात बोलता है कि मैं कोयटा जाना चाहता हूँ और मैं लिटरली इसको मना करती हूँ, मैं कहती हूँ नहीं जाना। और उसकी रीज़न बहुत सारी ऐसी है कि ऐसा सुनने को मिलता है कि कोई भी पंजाबी वहाँ पर जाता है तो वो वापस नहीं आता। सो मैं इसको हमेशा ये बात बोलती हूँ,
हालांकि बहुत सारे मेरे दोस्त हैं वो जो गए हैं वापस भी आए, लेकिन फिर भी जो है एक डर है। ये वो इस तरह का
ये इसमें मैं ये बात बोलती हूँ कि ये सारी चीज़ें एक स्ट्रैटेजी, एक इस तरीके से प्लान की गई है लंबे अरसे से कि एक प्रोविंस के लोग दूसरे प्रोविंस के लोगों के साथ मिक्सअप ना हो सके। इवन कि मुझे लगता है कि अगर ये स्ट्रैटेजी ऑपोजिट होती, लोग मिक्सअप होते, एक दूसरे के कल्चर को वैल्यू ज़्यादा करते, तो और ज़्यादा खूबसूरती आपको अपने कंट्री में
देखिए मैं अब थोड़ी बैक से बात करना चाहूँगा, थोड़ी जो हिस्ट्री की है। देखिए जैसे अफगानिस्तान की अगर बात की जाए तो हिंदुस्तान तक आते हुए जो है ना जिसको भी गुजर के आना पड़ता था ना भाई, उससे जो है ना रास्ते में अफगानिस्तान को ज़रूर फेस करना पड़ता था। तो देखा जाए हिस्टोरिकली, अगर देखा जाए तो जैसे अगर मुगल्स की बात की जाए, अगर क्या नाम लेते हैं चंगेज़ खान की बात की जाए, तो ये सारे वो हैं जो अफगानिस्तान के थ्रू होकर या तो इंडिया में आए या अफगानिस्तान से लड़ के दूसरी साइड पर जो है वो चले गए। तो अगर हिस्टोरिकली बात की जाए, उन्होंने बहुत सारी जंगें देखी हैं। तो जब एक लंबे अरसे तक जो है ना ये चीज़ चलती रहे ना, तो आपके जीन्स में वो चीज़ जो है वो शामिल हो जाती है। आप जो है ना उस तरह के बन जाते हैं कि आप इनके सख्त, ठीक है, सख्त जान जो है वो हो जाते हैं। दूसरा, अब जो बात आती है यहाँ पर, ठीक है ना, पाकिस्तान में अगर देखा जाए तो पाकिस्तान की जो एलीट है, अगर देखा जाए तो वही आपको हर जगह जो है वो रूल करती हुई जो है वो दिखाई देती है। इवन कि मैं अगर बात करूँ, आप लाहौर में हो या लाहौर से बाहर जाएं, आपको जो है ना आम इंसान, एक आम इंसान की तरह जो है ना वो ज़िंदगी गुजारते हुए जो है वो दिखाई देता है। लेकिन ऑन दी अदर साइड आप एलीट की बात करना, तो मेरा ख्याल है एलीट का कुछ यहाँ पर माइंडसेट इस तरह का है कि वो ये नहीं चाहती कि भाई उसकी हुकूमत जो है ना, जो वो एक लंबे अरसे से करते आ रहे हैं, वो खत्म हो।
डेफिनेटली वो गरीबों को गरीब रहने देना चाहती है, क्योंकि अगर गरीब गरीब नहीं रहेंगे तो फिर उनके नौकर कौन रहेंगे।
अभी जैसे बीच में एक वाक़ई का जिक्र किया गया, मेरा ख्याल है वो उकाड़े का जो बात की गई, वो फैसलाबाद जड़ामाला वाली साइड जो है ना, वो उस साइड का जो है वो वाक़या था, वो मैंने जो है वो सुना हुआ था। तो बीच में जो है उसकी वो बात की गई थी, वो मैंने सुना हुआ था। लेकिन हाँ, लोगों को जो है भाई माइंडसेट जो है वो इस तरह का यहाँ पर जो है वो बना दिया गया है कि आप जो है ना समटाइम्स जो है ना खुद बातें करते हुए जो है ना वो सोचते हैं। लेकिन अब की अगर बात की जाए, 2023 की बात की जाए, तो एक चीज़ जो है ना मुझे आकर देखने को मिलती है कि लोगों में जो पढ़े लिखे लोग हैं उनमें थोड़ी बहुत एक्सेप्टेबिलिटी आपको देखने को मिलती है। और वो जो है ना बेशक अभी ओपनली नहीं बोल रहे, लेकिन जैसे आपस में बैठे होते डिस्कशन ज़रूर होती हैं चीज़ों पे।
बिल्कुल, मैं ये चीज़ मानूंगी। और दूसरा ये, लेकिन ये बड़े शहरों तक ही सीमित
है। बिल्कुल,
छोटे शहरों में आपको अभी भी बहुत ज़्यादा कंजर्वेटिव लोग नज़र आते हैं।
बिल्कुल।
सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम जो मुझे नज़र आती है कि यू डोंट हैव राइट टू आस्क समथिंग, जो मुझे लगता है कि सबसे मेन प्रॉब्लम है। आप किसी पर भी ब्लास्फेमी जो है वो मतलब
लगा
सकते हैं। तो ये चीज़ें मुझे लगता है कि ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जो कि रिफॉर्म्स जिनमें लाने की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है। और ये इसका एक प्रॉपर लॉ होना चाहिए कि किसी भी एक आम आदमी को राइट नहीं है कि वो कुछ भी डिसीजन ले ले, या आप किसी
स्टेट का होना चाहिए
जो है वो अटैक कर दे।
बिल्कुल,
ये चीज़ें नहीं होनी चाहिए। और जैसे बीच में फ़िरका वारियत की भी बात की गई, मैं इस चीज़ से भी अग्री करूंगी। पाकिस्तान में काफ़ी ज़्यादा फ़िरका वारियत है।
ये वाली ये ऐसी लंबी बहस है ना, ये फ़िरका वारियत वाली, इसमें जो है ना बहुत सारी आप चीज़ें देखते हैं नेट पे, तो आप जो है ना ज़रा थोड़ा सा हो जाते हैं कि यार बस इस चीज़ को जो है ना
नहीं। लेकिन ये है कि फिर अगेन मैं बात करूंगी कि शहरों में लोगों के माइंडसेट और है, छोटे शहरों में लोगों के माइंडसेट और है। बट अच्छा, बहुत सारे लोग हमसे भी पूछ रहे हैं भाई आपका फिरका क्या है। मैं ऑनेस्टली इस चीज़ पर बिल्कुल भी वो नहीं करती। कमेंट में कहती हूँ अच्छा इंसान होना चाहिए आपको, और आपके अंदर इंसानियत होनी चाहिए। फिरकों में क्या रखा हुआ, हर फिरका एक दूसरे के बारे में गलत बातें कर रहा है। सो पहले खुद में यूनिटी होनी चाहिए, फिर आप किसी बाहर वाले को बात करो। प्रॉब्लम किसी में खुद में ही यूनिटी नहीं है। मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि रिलीजन आज के टाइम में आकर बहुत मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि चीज़ ऐसी हो गई हुई है कि पाकिस्तान में स्पेशली अभी भी ये एग्जिस्ट करती है कि आप इतनी बात नहीं इसके बारे में उस तरीके से खुल कर सकते, क्योंकि जो मेजॉरिटी में लोग हैं वो फ्लेक्सिबल नहीं है। अभी जैसे मौसम कह रहा है कि कुछ पढ़े लिखे लोगों की अब तादाद होती जा रही है, बट अभी वो बहुत कम है। आप अभी भी बहुत ओपनली इतनी चीज़ें डिस्कस नहीं कर सकते यहाँ पर। हाँ, बट मैंने ये चीज़ ज़रूर देखी है कि उन लोगों ने सर खपाना जो है वो बंद कर दिया हुआ है, और वो जैसे लाइफ को लेकर चलना चाहते हैं वो लेकर चल रहे हैं। सो मुझे लगता है कि आने वाले टाइम में शायद हो सकता है कि मज़ीद चीज़ें जो हैं वो बेहतर हों। बट प्रॉब्लम ये भी है ना कि ऐसे लोग जो हैं वो दूसरे कंट्रीज़ में निकलते जा रहे हैं क्योंकि वो यहाँ पर एडजस्ट नहीं कर पा रहे। तो मुझे लगता है कि हिस्ट्री में जो चीज़ें हुई हैं उनमें से बहुत सारी चीज़ें ऐसी हैं जो कि अगर तभी उनमें रिफॉर्म हो जाता तो मेरा ख्याल में बेहतर रहता, और आज के बहुत सारे लोगों के लिए जो है वो आसानी पैदा हो जाती। बाकी मैं कहूँगी कि बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग पॉडकास्ट था। अब मेरा गला भी मुझे लग रहा है
मैं वही सोच रही हूँ बस कर दें, आपका गला जो है ना वो।
जब भी हम हिस्ट्री की बात करते हैं ना, मेरा बहुत दिल करता है कि हम लोग इसके बारे में बात करें, डिस्कशंस करें, पता होना चाहिए, क्योंकि एक आम पाकिस्तानी को इन चीज़ों के बारे में नॉलेज नहीं है। तो मुझे लगता है कि ये बहुत अच्छा मीडियम है कि लोगों को पता होना चाहिए। सो गाइस, ये तो थी हमारी आज की वीडियो। आई होप आपको अच्छी लगी होगी, और आपका क्या ओपिनियन इसके बारे में जरूर बताइएगा कमेंट सेक्शन में। इसी के साथ ही मुझे वीडियो
लाइक, सब्सक्राइब,
वीडियो
शेयर,
एंड कीप अस इन प्रेयर्स।
गुड बाय।